On page 157 of the workbook, you had a close read that asked you to mark the words that refer to date and time in paragraph 2. So you should have marked probably that Saturday, the 1st of January, 1944. And also, she'll do the calculation for you. They've been in hiding for a year, 5 months, and 25 days. It's important for Anne or somebody in the annex to tell us when it is because we have no way of knowing, as in the audience, we have no way of knowing how much time has passed. So one of the characters will have to say it out loud, or Anne will have to write it in her diary that'll be read aloud to us. The whole purpose of this is the last time we saw these people, it was Hanukkah of 1942. So now this is New Year's of 1944. More than a year has passed. And as Anne tells us at the end of paragraph 2, their life is at a standstill. They've been cut off from the world now for almost a year and a half. And, it's all 8 of them in that tiny, tiny little annex. They're bound to be getting on each other's nerves, as we see throughout the course of that scene. On page 159, we have another close read, and that new close read asks you to look at paragraph 26 and mark details that show what Miep wrote on the 2 cakes. So Mrs. Von Don announces that she wrote peace in 1943 on the previous cake. She remembers that, and then she looks at this cake and sees that it says peace in 1944. And essentially, Meep, Mr. Crawler, and even Mr. Frank, it's kind of their job to try to keep all the other members of the annex hopeful. They, if they devolve or if they descend into depression and hopelessness, it would be even worse. So you'll notice throughout the play that Pym always is asking them questions about hopeful things and about looking at the future and what's the first thing you want to do when you get out of here. And that's his personality. And Meep is an extension of that. Mr. Crawler is an extension of that. But Meep and Mr. Crawler are important because these are people that are putting their lives on the line for the people hiding inside the annex. They're people who are willing to take huge risks. And so that's hopeful in the sense that there are other people out there that are willing to resist the Nazis, not just the people being targeted by them. On page 161, we have the episode where Mr. Von Don is going to sell Mrs. Von Don's fur coat and try to get some cigarette money. We focused a lot on Mr. Von Don in class, but if you look at Mrs. Von Don's actions here in paragraphs 67 through 74, she is very concerned. She's very upset about this. She's losing material goods, but it's also kind of symbolism of all the things that they've lost. The ability to have a happy life, a carefree life. And her coat is definitely a symbol of the wealth and the privilege that she had before all the stuff with the Nazis started to happen. The close read on page 163 is very important, said the guy who knows what's on your test. It asks you to mark from paragraphs 97 through 109 the details that show the characters' responses to Mr. Crawler's news. And there is quite a difference between the characters here. Mr. Frank versus Dussel versus Mr. Von Don. As you can see, Dussel expects the worst. And Dussel is an alarmist, and he doesn't just expect the worst privately to himself. He wants to announce this to the entire room. You can see, though, that Mr. Frank is not only he's not an alarmist, but he is also trying to rationally think his way through this. So he asks questions like, is it so much that he's asking in line 104? What are they paying nowadays? And then again in 106, offer him half. Then we'll soon find out if it's blackmail or not. And not jumping to any conclusions. Dussel wants to jump to lots of conclusions, and Mr. Frank is very much more calm than that. And so Dussel is more likely to cause panic and Mr. Frank is more likely to try to manage the emotions of himself as well as everybody else in the annex. On page 165, in the episode toward the end of Act 2, Scene 1, when Peter brings her cake and he wants to tell her that he appreciates the fact that she can speak eloquently, that she can speak well and speak to the adults. As Peter lets us know, in 130 is a great example of this. Paragraph 130, he keeps stumbling over his words. He's very emotional. He wants to slam Mr. Dussel and the adults for some of the things that they're saying. Specifically Dussel here because Dussel was picking on him about the cat. So Peter can't find the words. Peter can't find the words in paragraph 130, but Peter also can't find the words when he is confronted by somebody in the annex, and that's why he takes off and goes to his own room. And so you see that there's quite a contrast between Anne, who expresses herself very well, and Peter, who can barely express what he feels. At this point, the close read on page 167 may seem kind of obvious, but we have stage directions here in lines 157 and 159 that are telling us what the stage looks like. And basically the lights dim out and it goes pretty much to black and you just hear Anne's voice over everything. And what Anne says in 158, what they're identifying here as a soliloquy, it's going to stand out then because there's nothing for you to look at, nothing for you to be distracted by. You're just listening to her words in the dark as an audience member. And then we hear what kinds of things they're going through. You hear about their hunger, and you hear about Mr. Crawler being in the hospital, and you hear about Mr. Dussel continuing to talk about how they're going to get caught, and just some of the awful things that are happening to them. This brings us to the end of the close reads for Act 2, Scene 1.